Well, ladies and gentlemen, we are about to get stuck into a match between Benno and IskatuMesk, and this one is on Repulsion. I hope you guys are looking forward to this. Of course, we are seeing a low resource quantity, so this is a very old version of Repulsion. It doesn't have any of the changes because whoever hosted this has really old maps, so that's pretty funny. But we're going to see what happens in this game. I was told to cast it. I was told that it was a goofy match, so we're going to see what's up with that. I believe Mesk described this as mechanics versus game mechanics, and I guess what he meant by that is like his understanding of mechanic, or like somebody's understanding of the game mechanics versus somebody's actual mechanical skill. So we're going to see how that one shapes up. So this was played on the release version. This does not contain the selection extender, to my knowledge, because then later on, Mesk and I played some matches, and he was remarking on the selection extender as if it had been the first time he had experienced it. So if you're looking to experience that yourself, of course, you can head on over to pre-release. And beyond that, we are indeed going to be seeing how this game unfolds. It looks like Mesk is going to be going for a fulcrum, although he is very late with that in terms of, being able to position it super far away. I do wonder, I'm pretty sure this can't happen, but it wouldn't necessarily surprise me that if you rallied this in this direction, would the vulture spawn on the low ground? I don't think that Veek was able to program in a safety for that, so I'm sure there's going to be some cases where that can happen. Obviously, we should force you to spawn in the same height level or whatever. And maybe it does do that, and I'm just being a little skeptical. But either way, we will have a scout from Benno, fairly late into the game at that point. And we know Benno's playstyle. We kind of know Mesk's playstyle as well, but it'll still be interesting to see how this game goes. And it looks like we won't even see the action for something like that because the rally point is off to the side. So, yeah, I think the rally on the low ground or whatever can happen with Starcraft 1 as well. It just obviously is very map dependent because you don't have directional rallies or what have you. So it'll be interesting to see what happens there. Obviously, his worker is stuck, so he should lift the fulcrum, and there it is. Indeed, he will. Give us a little bit of a honk. There are some Mavericks being rallied across the map, and the first one will immediately start jumping onto that Mason. The second one is on attack move, so you're going to see that one as well. This is pretty good scouting info for Mesk. He is now aware that there are at least 3 Mavericks, if he was paying attention, and that is 3, with a star pad on the way for a follow-up. So an anchor is being constructed close to the Ministry, and a vulture will be out relatively soon, but there's an anchor being constructed by Benno's Mason as well, so that's kind of curious. This is the first time we've seen Benno do anything cheeky and cheesy. It will be spotted by the vulture, of course, and there's not really any backup here for it. So this will just end up being micro city for Mesk. We don't see another Mason be moved over here, so this is kind of risky to do that right there, but he had no way of knowing. He had no way of knowing that the fulcrum was off to the side, right? So in his mind, he's like, well, there's probably no production structure over there, so why would maybe he would rally towards the front of the front gates or something. And he can keep this anchor here for a good while he waits to see what else might happen. Will he cancel it is the question. I'm not sure that he has the wherewithal there. In fact, no, he will not cancel it. So he doesn't get his money back. And remember, on this update, it is 150 minerals. So canceling it to get 100 minerals back at that point, I believe it's 75% of your cost. That is actually pretty significant, right? And we do see an interesting rally over here with some of his Mavericks having been taken some pot shots at by the vultures. I wonder if maybe he wants to do some sort of delayed run by. I like to do this myself a decent amount, but versus vultures with all of the lobotomy mines for map control, it feels like it's a little bit hard to actually accomplish that. We do have a treasury here. It's actually blocking the potential quarry spot, so until this treasury is complete, Mesk will not be able to start investing into his economy even further. Meanwhile, of course, Benno will technically have the timing advantage on that because he's building it on location. And so he will not have to float his treasury away somewhere, and presumably it'll be easier for him to saturate and all that. The anchor is going to take the place of the fulcrum, so they're going to go ahead and switch sides over in this direction. And there is an anchor being constructed over here. So I think, Benno has gone over to the dark side. He is indeed interested in, potentially moving over and seeing what he can accomplish as far as all that is concerned. This is going to be interesting to see what kind of little things he can do and take care of. That being said, obviously because this is an older version of the map, outdated version of the map, we are already seeing some resource fields be depleted in the main. So it's not really much of a surprise there, but it is what it is. Did the star pad really do anything? There's a bunch of wraiths out, but it is not looking like he's actually used them for scouting or anything. That's definitely some point where Benno could improve. There's also, of course, a double quarry setup over here. So we are seeing a very heavy committal into an economic game. Here's a couple of units lying around over here. The Cyprians will accept the vultures. I think 3 Cyprians beat 2 vultures, but obviously Micro could change that. And, you know, a 4th Cyprian down there should act as a nice insurance policy. We'll see about that one. The anchor has been staffed full of Mavericks and will now start to fly on towards the other side of the map. It looks like it is going to go ahead and be rallied downward. Not too far, but either way. And it looks like these vultures have not yet encountered the Cyprian menace. There's an anchor back here in the resource line. Some workers could be transferred, but not a huge deal at this stage, I suppose. And a quarry going down at the expansion. So yeah, there's going to be less production queue for workers. We're already seeing, even though Benno surprisingly has fewer workers. Well, maybe that'll change once this anchor gets dropped here. I'm actually not quite sure how it's going to be taken care of. It's really nice that the Watchdog is able to get some good damage dealt on that. Because, you know, just softening it up, and the response time is pretty slow for Mesk. Actually unloading and then not finishing the kill on one of the Masons does mean that Benno ended up losing a little bit of efficiency there. There has already been an Atlas be put down, so that is going to be an advantage in theory for Mesk. He's going to lose the Watchdog, and a Cyclops is just about done. His anchor flying on over with a Vulture in it. Obviously that will allow some pretty good play in that context for him. It's actually going to get lifted. Obviously, in the Vulture case, you can just lift off and reposition to your heart's content. And it looks like that might be everything for the anchor. Somewhat interesting that Benno has decided to abscond his position so quickly. He didn't push any further to see if there was, you know, a tier 2 coming or anything, and indeed, we know that there is. So that's where, like, Mesk has almost no military units. He's already getting a Palladium, though. So that's where some of his, you know, power actually is coming through. With 2 production queues, he can slowly restock, and he's blocking his quarry again, so he's not interested in adding that onto his main ministry at all. It looks like there is a defensive anchor being put down in the main, as Benno is looking to harass with some Wraiths. Once you get to a critical mass, obviously, versus Masons in particular, right, versus Terran in TBT, you need 7 Wraiths to one-shot a Mason. So that is a pretty heavy committal. However, I think he might actually have that, because it looks like there's 6 over there and a 7th on the way. So if he waits for it and he micros well, he can actually demonstrate pretty good level of power. He's also guarding, you know, a couple of spots with some standalone Mavericks, and that's obviously going to be pretty good for him. Looks like he's not going to wait for that 7th Wraith. Doesn't look like Mesk has spotted it yet either. And there you go. He's able to just start picking them off. And you can see, you know, maybe one of the Masons was actually just wounded or something from the Maverick drop. But either way, he can start to pick off. And hey, you know what? Dealing with these Vultures as well, they don't have mines left over, but it's still something pretty effective because, you know, it only takes 2 extra Wraiths to start one-shotting Vultures themselves. We'll see if that ends up happening. There's another one on the right here, just sort of hanging out. And with this anchor over here, he could land that, repair it, and build a treasury over here for a quick third, quick-ish, with a 2nd Palladium coming down and a redoubling into Watchdogs. I feel like maybe he showed his hand a little bit too early. He only picked off, what, 3 Masons, something like that, and then a couple of Vultures. So the Wraiths could have paid for themselves and been a little bit more aggressive. We can see here that Mesk is super light on resources down in the south base. Being able to pick off some units in that context would have been really nice, I think. Meanwhile, an anchor is once again going to staff the anti-ground passageway there, and a star pad is on the way, as well as a deployed Madrigal to guard against the Wraiths. That's definitely not a bad shout, but it is a fairly expensive move to do. You always have to wonder in your head, like, am I committing too hard to static defense? You know, despite the star pad, or sorry, despite the tech up rather, this is actually, that's the first unit that he's demonstrated, right? He's got 2 more Madrigals on the way, but it took him a very long time after his Atlas for Mesk to actually deploy a tier 2 unit. Yeah, he had the Palladiums, but he didn't do anything with them, right? So that's something that you can already see he's maybe a little bit further behind than he would like. Obviously, in the worker department, we know he's 15 workers behind, and an extra production queue behind as well. But as I was sort of prophesizing, you know, that makes sense. You evacuate the anchor, use it defensively. Just one less thing you've got to set up for a new base. And Benno's actually looking fairly solid overall. You know, he's not idling too many Masons. In fact, the only one that he is idling is on this stockade there, and he's going to go ahead and repair that anchor up to full HP while he gets a 4th production queue for workers. The one thing you do have to worry about, oh, here we go. We're actually going to see some silliness here where one of the Vultures gets very heavily softened up and the Wraiths are going to start moving around. Just so happens to have idled there. So the first one is going to be dealt with. And the second one will indeed also be taken care of. Obviously, this anchor here with the Mavericks is going to, you know, just deal with this Vulture. If he was a little bit more on top of the minimap awareness, he definitely could have used those Wraiths to deny any scouting information. But at the very least, Mesk now knows there is a third. I'm behind economically, which I kind of already knew. But the fact that he went for a third means that he's, you know, going to take a little bit of time before he gets, you know, anything too crazy. Or maybe that obviously slows down his more aggressive economic approach because he's transferring workers and he's got the anchor there, so he clearly had to do some setup and whatnot. Third base being selected and secured with an Anseal to boot by Mesk. He's going to have to add on a quarry, of course. And beyond that, he's going to have to transfer some workers up there. Again, building his Palladium over here means that he can't ever build an add-on on this ministry, which is, in my opinion, a mistake. Just the way that it is, right? Now, Mesk is constructing a watchdog over here. That is... I'm assuming he walked over here and maybe saw the Maverick out of the corner of the basin's eye. But we'll have to see about that one. A couple more idled workers over here, and some Fulcrums coming in for a Palladium switch, which makes sense given that that's something that you can start to set up while your Atlas is being constructed. So despite Benno having a lower amount of time to prepare for something like a, you know, just generally he doesn't have the tier 2 stuff yet. He's only now getting his Atlas completed. Despite all of that, he has been able to pretty successfully, you know, take care of a bunch of things, which is nice. He's massed up a bunch of Wraiths. He's got a bunch of Cyprians at home for defense. His Atlas is just now finished. He's got a third base up before his enemy, and he's setting up a fourth even now. He'll even end up finding this Mason surely. The question is, yeah, I think out of the Wraith passageway here, he should be able to find that. Now, he does have a bunch of Cyclops heading to his position, which is a little bit spooky. At the same time, you know, I guess he must not have actually seen this. But the Cyclops are here. The Wraith does get scouted and dealt with. Cyclops will not win this fight against Cyprians. And obviously they're just going to end up getting pulled into this general area where there's only a single watchdog. So this is going to be a little bit annoying for Benno to clean up now because he didn't check his corners and he wasn't being too cautious. I don't know why he bothered canceling that. The Cyclops cannot threaten him whatsoever. If the anti-air defense or the anti-surface defense lift off, you can pick them off with Wraiths, either one. Definitely should have picked off the Mason at the very least so that he had to send another one up if he was going to expand. But he's given a lot of tempo over, and he's only now bringing over the Cyprians, it looks like. So he decided to send them back home, I guess, and that's definitely going to affect his tempo. He has lifted his star pad, and he's not building anything out of it right now, so it is a little bit of a waste. And he is getting some phalanxes, so he intends to siege this position, it looks like. Now, phalanxes have 14 range when deployed, and sentinels have 10 plus 2 range on the cliff. So if you find the right position, you can deploy the phalanx out of range and thus siege a position in TVT against sentinels. That being said, that does obviously give some tempo over. And we actually don't see any Trojans made, it looks like, so that's a little bit curious. A third Fulcrum being added back at home from Mesk, who's been allowed to start harvesting minerals from this position over here. And the Wraiths will go ahead and confirm that momentarily, I imagine. Benno still being somewhat cautious. Has a lot of workers oversaturating the space, which isn't terrible, but it just means that obviously he was intending to transfer a bunch more, I think. That's pretty safe to say. He doesn't have much over in his main, though. If he wanted more income on short form, he could just rally some more workers in that direction. Just surveying the battlefield here. Remember, there's no selection extender in this match, so Benno is having to deal with a bunch of control groups. He's got tons of workers idling over here, and indeed, Mesk is going to go ahead and expand here. So the Wraiths will be able to rescout this and confirm a little bit of activity has happened. And again, I think Benno really just overcomplicated this a lot. He could have just won the fight with Wraiths alone. Even with the Watchdog and the Cyclops, you know, you can split your Wraiths, you can focus fire the individual Cyclops. Yeah, the Anseal complicates things, but you have the Cyprians as well. Like, there's not really a reason for him to cancel the Treasury, especially, because even if the Treasury goes up and then gets attacked, well, suddenly you can use that to your advantage, and obviously it blocks him from building a Treasury on site as well. I mean, he can obviously build it somewhere else, but at this point, obviously, we are seeing some pretty significant punish from a little bit of a lack of control, as you can see here. So, definitely he needs to deploy the phalanxes. Again, you can deploy them out of range. Statistically speaking, it is possible. I don't think he's going to necessarily have a great amount of success sieging this place. He's going to get one more shot off, but they're not even targeting on the Sentinel, so Well, that will end up getting lifted off, and now he's lost so many Wraiths that it's going to be a little bit... He isn't producing any more, but he is getting some Valkyries. That's interesting, because he's going to go for Valkyries, assuming that Mesk is switching into air. Mesk has a lot of Idle Masons himself. He's going to have to wrangle a lot of those as he attempts to move his units around. You can see his APM is a little bit under Benno's. Benno was over in triple digits a little bit earlier. So, yeah, indeed, he's going to go ahead and rally some of those units over to his fourth. So, yeah, at this point, Mesk is actually ahead economically in theory. Question is, will he be able to make much of that advantage? Definitely doesn't have as many military units as Benno has, nor does he have as many workers. So this is funny. Glad we can still not figure out what's causing that. Repair little line there. Now, the Valkyries can just walk up in here and immediately shut down the Anseal. I mean, there's only one Watchdog and one Cyclops for anti-air over here. So you don't even really need to do much. You can just walk in here and start tickling them with Wraiths, forcing a liftoff potentially, although obviously that's not going to work. But again, Benno is really cautious. He could easily break this position. If he wants to go aggressive somewhere else, that's also acceptable, but it feels like he could easily break this position. And all he really needs to do is bring some more, anti-ground ships, like Gorgons in particular, as the replacement to his Wraiths. But instead, he's committing pretty heavily into Valks, which, okay, yeah, again, there's two Anseals. There's a Wraith that is not being used for vision or anything by Mesk. And I guess you've got the structures that lift off. Okay, well, other than that, though, you're not going to be able to target too much. So I think, again, when you have Wraiths, you should be, waypointing them around the map, just even establishing patrol routes, seeing where units are coming, etc. Some Trojans are being ferried off to the top left in the meantime, and yes, the Cyprian march has begun. And yeah, the Valks are here, but there's no air. There's no air at all, which, again, I think Benno could easily have scouted. Now, the Cyprians are here, but the Madrigals will do okay against them, even at this range. I mean, particularly considering they do outrange them. So this is a little bit spooky. But the Cyclopses have all fallen, and there's still an equivalent amount of Cyprians to deal with right now, it looks like. Again, at this point, if you want to just set up shop, deploy your phalanxes, and see where else you can go, that would work out quite nicely. It looks like Benno just wants to charge on forward anyway, despite the opposing phalanx. And hey, this is a fine play as well. Siege this base, start wailing on the treasury and forcing a liftoff, start killing workers, and force an interaction from Mesk. He wants to station more of his Cyprians over here. He is rallying more units down. Does have more Valkyries. Again, very, very paranoid about an air switch, but we know that's not going to happen. Although he could use the Valks to walk in here and kill the treasury as it's lifted off. And this is another thing that you don't ever... I mean, I don't know that Mesk would have been in a position to siege this if he did have a ministry. But remember, the ministry has, almost double the health, right? It's 50 off of doubling the health of the treasury and 1 extra armor. So this does add up. I mean, that's a pretty significant difference where he only barely evacuated it before it started to burn. So yeah, in that context, it's actually pretty significant. He is building a ministry down here, perhaps for those exact reasons. And meanwhile, of course, doesn't really have many workers over there. Another one just died miserably, as they say, as Mesk says, in fact, channeling a little bit of his commentary for this episode. So what we are seeing here, I think, I can't imagine this replay goes on for much longer at this stage because obviously we do have a pretty considerable amount of forces. I shouldn't say that about a replay that features Benno. I'm sure somebody is going to go ahead and laugh at the time code right now. Pretty good play from Mesk to block the Cyprian shots with the treasury. And obviously not great from Benno to just ignore that while he gets shot on. Shot at? Whatever. I was trying to say something when it just sounded like a hybrid between two other things. He is going to go ahead and get his Daedalus, though. Is Mesk doing the same? He is. Okay, well, if we get to tier 3 and some diadems hit the ground, then maybe some of my tune changes. This base is very slowly being set up, but it's harvesting the minerals more so than anything. And there have been 0 capped geysers for, I want to say either player, but that is a lie. There are 2 reservoirs, 3 reservoirs. Do we have 4 and 5? We do not. And obviously, this is a very old version of the map, so not only does it have low minerals, but it has a lot of extra gas as well, because it's the old economic model. I really like the quarry positioning here so he can make a mason. I guess he was trying to do that so that he could repair the treasury, but I don't think that's going to happen. Could have just sent another mason over there and, moved the treasury somewhere else, but... Mesk Brain works in a very strange and peculiar way. Again, if he had paired some Wyverns or some Gorgons into this position, he could definitely have done something about the base, like over here, for example. He obviously could just drop a bunch of units onto that position to take advantage of having a star pad and, use the Trojan and stuff. I've been thinking a little bit, does Terra need a tier 2 transport? Mostly just because if you go starport, you still can't build Trojans. They only come from the star pad. I think it's kind of cool in a way that they do need that tier 1 tech if they want to do drops, and otherwise they need tier 3 tech if they want to do anything else. Now, as I'm talking about it's cool to do this and that, it's not so cool for Mesk to have this base get lost. Again, pretty much everything matters here. Yeah, of course he is building a Daedala, and yeah, of course it'll finish around the same time as the Daedala of Benno, but one of these players is in a distinctly better position, for sure. So, this base has gone unscouted, this base has gone uncontested, and apparently unnoticed by Mesk for a good while. We do have some cliff advantage shenanigans happening over here, so I'm sure you guys can be happy about that. But again, the Wraith could just come over. The Wraiths could come over here and wipe that out. Or if, again, Benno, if he had, I don't know, something a little bit more like Wyverns, Gorgons, etc. But he does have his Daedala, and so too does IskatuMesk. And a Diadem has already been started in the main. So we're going to see, a Diadem in the bottom right as well. Going to see what's up with that. Something that Mesk said to me in the matches we played afterwards. We did play on a map that needed testing, right? Biddy B made a map, a CMBW version of Butter called Margarine, of course, which is funny. He has asked for us to test that, and so, of course, I ended up doing that while we were testing the selection extender, and it ended up not being very safe by CMBW standards. When you don't have high ground, you can't use cliff advantage. That's a pretty big part of the defender's advantage, I would argue. But either way, it is something to think about. Dude, the Wraiths do almost no damage to the Phalanx, but eventually they will kill it. Yeah, so it's something to think about anyway, and something that Mesk said anyway was, when he was fighting against Benno, he never felt like at any point it was unwinnable. And even some of the Ascension games, he didn't feel like were unwinnable. But when he played against me, apparently that felt like unwinnable to him. And that is mostly because I am pretty hyper-aggressive in the early game most of the time, so... You can ask Alexander about that, actually. I mind-gamed him by, like, all-in rushing him, like, 3 or 4 games in a row, and then I just went straight for... I went straight past that and into, like a Mega Greed, like, Expo first thing as Zerg or something. So this is kind of cute, because we obviously do have this Diadem down here in the bottom base. We can start talking a little bit more about this game. Iron Foundries are being constructed by both players. The Atelier is already done, so we could see the Iron Foundries add some of the endgame tech there. I'm not sure. I didn't see any other endgame tech for Benno. But if the Iron Foundries were being constructed over here, that obviously is something for Benno to know that, I mean, obviously Tier 3 is here because there's a Diadem. But you can kind of see maybe that kind of dictates something about what Mesk's game plan was. I'm looking around to see if there's anything else to comment on as far as tech goes, but it doesn't really look like it. Now, at this stage, the Phalanxes have indeed fallen back. Looks like there was another shot there from the Diadem targeting something. Who knows what it was. Nanite assembly as well. Paladin's on the way. So it doesn't look like he was building the Atelier for the endgame mech army. He wanted the Atelier for the Nanite assemblies. So he is going to go ahead and add those as he continues to create Cyprians. And 5,000 minerals, 2,000 gas. I mean, yeah, Mesk has the same amount of gas, but clearly we can see, I think, the writing on the wall at this stage. Now, this treasury burning down. I might have missed another attack or something, a flyby, while I was busy talking about other things. Now, a Diadem over here could complicate this base for Benno. Obviously, he could probably relocate his treasury over here and harvest the gas at the very least, but, losing the mineral income is never good. Absolutely slapped, of course. The Ion Field does supercharge your units, so it's worth noting that. It increases their attack rate. Yeah, and this is a spot where Valkyries aren't actually that bad because you can fly them in here, pick off the air units that are giving vision, or the lifted structures, indeed. And that can definitely help. But it looks like there's mostly just a military move out over here on this side. The Hippogriffs are a pretty reasonable choice to use against the Diadems. Also Centaurs or anything of that nature are pretty good moves. So it looks like Mesk is going to try to take yet another base. That will be his 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7th. But it almost doesn't feel like, even though Mesk technically has more bases, it really doesn't feel like he has much of an advantage. I mean, he has way less workers than Benno. Obviously, he has almost, less than half of the military units compared to Benno as well. And despite the fact the Diadems are going to start slapping some cheeks, clapping some cheeks, it does feel to me like there's definitely some interesting moves to still be had. So There is one Cloaked Wraith here, which could be spotting for diadems. There's a Sentinel over here that will undoubtedly be lifted off at some point to spot this top middle base. I don't think really anything is in position to deal with it. There's a Watchdog and 2 Sentinels. Obviously, this Anchor full of Mavericks, but Sentinels do have pretty good beef as far as durability goes. So it's not too bad there. Diadem is going to go ahead and fire another shot onto the Phalanxes and the Paladin, and it does claim a couple of lives, mostly Cyprians and a Phalanx. You get absolutely slapped there. So the units are going to be pulled down. Nanite Assemblies do have Hadrons, and well, one of them is adding on. The other one has not yet produced anything, as far as I can tell. No rally point or anything to follow. More Paladins still. I mean, not a bad shout, of course. And yes, we do indeed see some silliness happening over here in the upper middle area. So this is the consequence of Benno not simply stamping the space out. When you play against Mesk, as a general advice, like, if you see him with a worker somewhere, just fucking kill the worker. Like, yes, okay, don't overcommit everything, but it's not that difficult, I think, to just, you know, tickle a couple of workers here with a Wraith. Like, he was in position. Benno definitely could have sniped the worker at the very least, and then, you know, suddenly that tumor doesn't grow. You know, you just have to deal with the couple of units that were made and a couple of structures that were made that ended up over there. So that definitely would have simplified this position, would have stopped this base from going up. Definitely something that I think Benno could improve on, particularly in this matchup. But, I mean, Mesk isn't the only person who does this. He's just the most famous one for it. So now Benno might feel like he's pressured to do something, and he might end up taking a relatively costly maneuver here. But he's going to go ahead and fly the Valkyries in at first. There are Sentinels, there are Phalanxes. It's not the best position to start attacking, but either way, there are Hippogriffs on the way. They have been rallied, but they will be the first 2 Hippogriffs for Benno. And yet, all of these units getting pumped up, not microing, not trying to move outside of the diadem shot or back away from the Sentinels or anything of that sort. And again, you need Phalanxes to siege Sentinels if you're going to be doing it from the low ground, and you need to do it somewhat cautiously. Another base going down, as this one has indeed fallen from the non-stop harassment of diadems. If you could call that harassment, I don't know. And yeah, Benno is definitely feeling the burn, feeling the brunt here of Mesk's sass. But it is just sass at this point. Like, technically, Mesk can come back, but I don't know. I can't. It's really hard to imagine Benno dropping this game. I guess he's got a huge bank, so that is unironically. I mean, those could be units on the field. But that is also points in his favor to some degree, because he can just walk in and spend all of his money, add more production, sustain that production for a while, despite losing a lot of workers and despite losing active mining of the minerals in the space. You know, it's still in a pretty good spot overall. So this does, however, allow for a ministry to get constructed on this side. It does look like Mesk is going to try to take this base in the mid-right there. And if he does deploy, you know, move the diadems further up and deploy more of an array of defenses, and obviously the diadem isn't really it's not really a base defense per se. It's a base offense, if anything. But of course, the Hippogriffs are here, and you can't realistically out-repair Hippogriffs forever. Of course, if you don't bring all of your Hippogriffs, that could be a problem. But at this stage, yeah. Oh, he's, you know, tell a lie. If you just have a million Masons, then it will obviously be a drain on your economy. But yeah, you can keep it repaired. It just doesn't seem very likely. Wellbore is coming in on the mid-left base. Mesk was not able to mine that there. He's trying to build some Watchdogs. Obviously, Benno's not going to allow that. So he could also siege the Watchdogs, right? This Watchdog in particular could be sieged. You can see it right there is already going to start burning down. So one is going to go ahead and get lifted into position. If the diadem doesn't block the shots, then the Watchdog is not going to be very useful. I like that he even bothered moving his Valkyries. He could just kill it with the Hippogriff. He also shouldn't stop attacking it. This is like, it's funny. This is almost like the, you know, Drakadin versus Anchor. Well, I guess Dragoon versus Bunker. What are you doing? You goofball. What have you done? Oh, no. He goofballed. He absolutely pranked himself. I think he, like, move-clicked it or something instead of it. I don't know what he did. I honestly don't know. No idea. But there's more, so at this point, again, like, that's so much gas and so many minerals that have to get spent just to repair this one diadem that's not even offering him that much help. He could lift it off and then move it somewhere else, but yeah, at this point it's just going to fall. Obviously, this base down here, I don't think that it's exactly been, you know, Benno's not made aware of it, but he did have vision of the Sentinel, so he knows that something is up. And there goes the diadem. It has finally fallen. The Hippogriffs can continue to push forward and, you know, deny mining of this base. Mesk, meanwhile, I'm not even sure what has Mesk been up to. He's starting to get nanite assemblies himself. He does have his atelier. He built some apothecaries. He has a Pythian, which I keep forgetting to send Juthriyong the new graphic for to make a wireframe. He's scouting out the middle of the map to see what exactly the position is for Benno. I don't know, man. It ain't looking too hot, I'll tell you that much. Some diadem shots are going off somewhere. Not sure exactly where. Looking around for the projectiles. Oh, I see. Some Pazuzus have made their way over here, so the Iron Foundries did, in fact, go up. I wasn't really looking at Mesk's main or anything. Where are the Iron Foundries? Did I... Oh, he rebuilt them in this space. Okay. So the Pazuzus are coming in. There are... Where are the Hippogriffs? There's more Hippogriffs over here. They can mop that up quite easily. He shouldn't have pulled these. He should have just kept them attacking, because now the space can continue adding some value to the coffers of Mesk. And over here, conversely... I mean, you have units over here. You can deal with this. So I don't even know that the treasury would fall. If you had a ministry, it wouldn't have died. If you built a ministry, it wouldn't have died. Oh my goodness. So meanwhile, Mesk is just going to end up losing all of these units without much hullabaloo. More Hippogriffs are being queued up. And yeah, indeed, Benno realizes, yeah, I can just kill this. Like, that's not that as big of a threat as I was worried about. Now, Pazuzus are pretty mobile, right? And obviously, they're going to deal a decent amount of damage in general. But versus Hippogriffs, they will get absolutely slapped. And versus anything that outranges them in general, they will also get absolutely slapped. And so the slappening continues. But Mesk hasn't really been able to move out too far. He's got 13 dilettantes in here, but he's not going to unload it. So that was pretty bad. That was pretty unfortunate. I don't see a Mason anywhere, so I guess that treasury will burn down. There was a Parthenon as well. The Parthenon's not just the source of Pythians, but also Taloses. So, indeed, we are going to see a Talos. I don't know if this is the only one that Mesk has, but it's the first one that I'm seeing. They build structures faster than Masons. So, worth noting for that alone. You can add diadems much faster to your repertoire if you have the money to spend. And again, like, there are ways for Mesk to annoy Benno, but I'm not so sure that there's ways for Mesk to win the game at this point. And even the degree to which Benno is being annoyed by Mesk, I still don't know if that's going to be enough. Like, it's not really going to be that significant, I feel like. So, as the Hippogriffs move a little bit closer, and we see, you know, diadems can attack air units now, so not very useful in this particular fight. There's not much heavy anti-air. There are some Paladins, but the Pazuzus are just going to get mauled before they can really do too much. The Paladins, on the other hand, could somewhat contend, right? I mean, the Hippogriffs do have more range than them, but it's still something, you know, it's by 3. It's something where if you, like, attack with cuirasses, which block the projectiles, or something to that effect, you know, it's definitely something that's possible, right? So you can see here, now you're starting to get the heavy splash. It's just that the positioning of the cuirasses wasn't quite there. And obviously the Hippogriffs are in a pretty good spot to just continue the beating, continue the shelling. Valkyries would have been okay. Obviously they do get pierced, right? So they don't block the shots from the Hippogriff. So what I would look for there is, you know, you need, again, to do something to block the shots or at least antagonize the Hippogriffs in some particular direction. Some irradiates from a Seraph could work because you can just sort of back up there. And also, here we go, Silver Tongues, right? Again, they have less range than the Hippogriff, but you can hit them with those. And there are even some Magnetars, which I think I remember reading that Mesk didn't even know that Yamato comes from the Magnetar. So, Yamato is AoE. If these Magnetars had been here a little bit sooner to fight with the Paladins, that could have actually turned the fight. And he even drops the cast, but it ends up dying, so... Well, obviously, we just talked about what could have swung him in his favor. But yeah, not having the skill to deploy them in the right order or in the right time is definitely going to contribute towards that. So. Okay. Got him. Absolutely got him. Penumbra would not be a bad shout now that I think about it. They don't have as much range as the Hippogriff, but they can withstand the burst. You can combine that with Azazel D-Matrix or Anseal Providence even, because the Hippogriff doesn't deal splash, it does a line trace. So, you know, you can absorb the projectile with the Anseal in that context, and it ends up being pretty good. Or you can obviously just use D-Matrix from the Azazel. So there's a couple of things that could have been done there. Funnily enough, Pythians, even if you don't load anything into them, Pythians would have not been a bad shout, because when you think of it in those terms, it's like, oh shit, my Pythian has, you know, exactly enough armor to block the shot, and it has 400 health, which is, I believe, the same as the Penumbra. It might have more now since the stat rework that we did. So that could have also worked out really nicely to, you know, block the shots in that context, right? Mesk usually comments on videos that involve him, so I'm sure he'll have something to say to my suggestions, and, you know, maybe he'll agree with them, or maybe he'll think it's still a little bit too difficult. But I look at this and I think this was, even once these Hippogriffs get to this point, Mesk had a lot of the tools. He just used them like drip feed, you know, one at a time or a couple at a time. Some dilettantes are going to get dropped off over here, but I don't know that they're going to be too effective. I hope you guys like that sound, though. Oh, man. He didn't hold pause them. Disaster. It's like each one of the dilettantes is a firing squad unto itself. You can see how effective it is at dealing with workers. Hey, it's even doing okay over here, I think. We probably need a smaller version of the projectile that, like, has less health. And, hey, you could use the Pythian. You could save him. You could move the Pythian over there. Block all the projectiles. Absolute destruction. One single man gunning down a whole bunch of other men. And then gets absolutely killed. Well, there are indeed some Hippogriffs here. One of them was even spinning for a moment. That's pretty cool. But I think the game is clearly over at this point. Almost certainly. Benno is going to go ahead and reestablish more bases. Hippogriffs are going to shoot each other. This is like the airborne version of the tank wars that you would normally see, right? Actually, there's some pretty good cost-efficient trades happening here for Mesk because Benno's busy looking at something else. Spending his money, maybe. He might be queuing up more Valkyries, in fact. No, he's not, actually. So, as a result of that alone, I think Mesk might be okay in the immediate future. I mean, it's just an ocean of rubble over there, so that's pretty funny. This base was lifted off at some point. Maybe there was some harassment over there. There's a Talos there. Oh, yeah, the Diadem, of course. Okay, that makes sense. Spotting for the Diadem with the Talos. Dirty plays. But yeah, I mean, despite the fact that there's not much in the queue at this point, he's still got 5k of each resource. Benno can surely be our champion of this match. Well, the Hippos can definitely end up getting slapped here. Oh boy, there's a lot of them. Absolutely annihilated. Didn't even get one Hippo. SMH. It's kind of funny that Hippos can't block their own shots, right? They have one less armor than required. Although, if you put an Azazel over them currently, that will... Oh no, that gives them forecast on that. It's not an armor bonus. Well, never mind. Forget I said anything. I was playing around with the idea of Defensive Matrix providing... instead of providing HP, it provides like 10 armor or something. But... Or even like something more ridiculous, like 20 armor. Imagine that on top of a Cuirass, like GG, bro. Down. Absolute murder. Well, Mesk is trying to reestablish some control. He's getting some ministries. He's slapping some treasuries. What's the response going to be for Benno? Some vultures have re-emerged. And they're dead. Yeah, I think at this point we're probably going to just fast forward. I can't really imagine much of value shows up here, but we'll check out some of the skirmishes. Oh my goodness. Stonks! Really the biggest threat is the Hippo, especially the Paladin actually died, so there's really no damage that can go down to those Hippos. That's pretty funny. Absolute slapping. Hippos ate the space in the top. Wait, are we actually getting into a point where the game is up for grabs again? He tried, but they didn't have any HP. That's unfortunate. Maybe Benno's also not interested in fighting hippos with anything other than hippos. He has way more means than Mesk does. Look at the money comparatively. There's hippos over here getting, you know, some tickling happening. If Benno's not careful, this could really result in some silliness. Obviously, with even one hippo can deal a lot of damage, right? It's pretty asymmetric in that way. So you can see here. Oh, they both fought. They both moved away. The paladins are now going to charge off to attack a diadem on the other side of the map. Oh, JK. They decided against it. Well, that diadem is finished too, so... Yeah, stand and shoot. No balls. Hey, you can use the ion field with the attack rates, so... Yeah. Forcing the lift off. He's going to try to make him splash himself, which, you know, kind of works, I guess. Obviously, it's going to go ahead and burn to death anyway, so... Probably, still, I would say quite cost efficient. It doesn't really take much damage onto the hippos. There were two of them that were very low, so they were vulnerable. This does allow Benno to relocate his own units here, so... From Diadem Wars to Hippogriff Wars, are the wars ever going to end? Of course the answer is no. Better that we fight in the digital age than we do in real life. Come on, boys. And we can, of course, also unite against the AI menace. Well, this ministry's dead. More hippos on the way, along with a Phobos. Now, the Phobos does block the shots, so I think maybe Mesk is aware of this. The Magnetars even block the shots. That's pretty curious. So we might actually see some value there. The Masons forced a diadem shot, and thus obviously did some damage to the hippos. That's pretty next level. Unfortunately, the Magnetar instantaneously should get focused on. No! Oh my goodness! How could you allow such a thing? His shot missed, I think. Well, I don't know what happened to the second one. I might have died before it hit. But, classic. There is this weird thing that happens with the go to max range attacks where sometimes they will shoot before the unit finishes turning. I haven't yet figured out how to fix that on a... I think I can fix it on a case-by-case basis, but I haven't yet figured out how to do anything else. So Mesk might still actually be able to clutch this out. Looking at the health of his hippogriffs, I'm not quite so sure. Obviously, there could be like a Valkyrie flank that comes in. There's paladins down here. Benno seems to be unsure of himself despite having so much money. Like a ridiculous amount of money. Trying to shell the Phobos, but it's just shrugging them off right now. Even versus 3 hippos, the Phobos doesn't really need to be that afraid. Like, you can take the shots and then absorb them all, right? It takes many sustained firing sequences to really get the Phobos in danger. So you can see that here, actually. What is Benno's plan? He's expanding, or trying to expand, in the bottom right, while his base is being fucking destroyed, despite having all these units down here. I think he just forgot. Wow, I can't believe Mesk actually took it. This whole time I was thinking, yeah, Benno wins this. Clearly Benno wins this. How could Benno throw this? Well, I guess we found out. That's really silly. Well, anyway, what a game. What a match. Okay, despite the low periods in the like 30, 40 minute mark, not a bad showcase of like what not to do, how to defeat Mesk, basically. Just kill his fucking workers that are building tumors in various spots. That will fix all of your problems. I'm really very surprised that it took that long for Benno to claim that area. And then on top of it, that he didn't just close the game. Benno needs to... I think, Benno significantly has this hesitation issue where he's worried about, like, overcommitting. And as Terran, I get that, because if you overcommit, you could lose the game, or at the very least be shot back into a disadvantageous position. But there's so many times where he has overwhelmingly the better force, and if he scouted with any of his wraiths that he made in this game, he would have known that he was overwhelmingly the victor in any would-be engagement, as long as he took it slightly. I mean, in some cases, he didn't even have to be very tactical. He could have just A-moved. But especially in the early stages, like maybe around the 15, 20-minute mark, like I feel like he 100% could have closed the game very easily. So something for him to work on. And of course, we did actually get to see some Hippo versus Hippo action, and the Magnetar sniped, what was it, 4 and almost killed a 5th Hippogriff all at once with a single Yamato. That was money. So there you go, some shots there for you. We'll show off the rest of the score screen. No surprise Benno produced more units, and certainly no surprise that Mesk built more structures, as he is known to do. And at the end of the day, obviously money went over to Benno, despite, I guess minerals mined were Mesk's favored, but, an old version of the map. That notwithstanding, pretty interesting match. So there you go.